right. Well, welcome to Nitrox. Again, I'm your instructor, Benjamin Hadfield. I'll be teaching you the Nitrox, and this will be more as a review than anything, just to make sure we picked up all the concepts and the concepts were well understood, since we've already been had a chance to go through the homework as well as watch the online video. Just to kind of recap just really quickly, through the process of this, there's a tremendous amount of specialties out there. Nitrox just happens to be one of them. The cool thing with Nitrox is that it does make up one of the two specialties you'll need for to become a specialty diver, as well as one of the four specialties you will need to be an advanced diver, and one of the four specialties plus stress and rescue that you need for master diver as well. There are a lot of different directions. And so Darren and Michelle, I always encourage taking a look through and figuring out what you want to do and where does that look like for you for looking at in terms of going to your next class and what kind of diving you want to do. So here's a few options out there. This is stuff that I can teach, and what you'll find is the list of the things that I can't teach is substantially shorter. I think there's only 5 or 6 specialties that I don't teach. I'm working on a couple of them, and there's a couple of them you don't want. So overall, I'm just going to reiterate, there's some...
That's a quick question.
Yes, sir.
How frequent are the classes, or how does that kind of work as far as like knowing that, let's say, deep diving, like, is that like on a schedule, or does it just depend on?
Actually, so there's a couple different ways. Each instructor runs it a little differently. I tend to run it on demand. I put it out there, and as I hear interest, I go ahead and get the class scheduled up and taken care of. I do have another student that one of my dive masters at Joshua, he wants to do deep diving. So he is doing, he is signed up for, I don't even need to look it up. I can just tell you, deep dive, limited viz, and navigation. So he's going to go through those 3 courses with me individually. And we will schedule a time around his schedule to make that happen. But if deep diving is a class that you guys are interested, I'm happy to get you guys involved in that one as well. The nice thing is I can actually teach all 3 of those courses in coercion together and combine skills through them. I just need to accomplish 3 dives total if I combine them together. So if that's something you're interested in, I'd love to have you guys a part of that. In terms of advanced skills, I have some students. Like I have you'll meet Donnie tomorrow. He's a former Marine, and he's former Marine infantry. With him, I went ahead and I did a 5-minute Q&A to confirm skills for navigation. And then once I was satisfied, I went ahead and signed him off on navigation. So if you see something in through this that with your previous career that made sense, that you have experience in, we can look at it. We'll go through the process. And if I can sign you off on it, I absolutely will. I have no problem with that. But I definitely want to make sure you have the experience and the skill to do that. So I never just rubber stamp and say, oh, hey, you're a Marine, you're good to go on navigation. I say, oh, great, you're a Marine. Let's talk about that. What is this? What is that? And I ask the most penetrating questions on that and make sure that they understand. So just want to make sure that you're aware. Experience absolutely does count towards certain things. But yeah, if you guys are interested, I can look up, I believe his first deep dive classroom is going to be, let me pull it up, because if I didn't have a schedule, I don't know how I would live. It's the 2nd week in July, and I want to say, where'd it go? Where did you go? It's not that day because that's my mom's in town. There it is. It is July 18th is class 1 for deep diving. Deep diving can be accomplished in one class, but our dives for those will most likely be August 4th or August 5th. I'm sorry, for the deep dive, navigation, and night and limited viz. Excuse me. And the way I get away with night and limited viz is when we go to Ryrie and you get below about 40 or 50 feet, you lose all the sun. So every dive you do at Ryrie past 60 feet is a night dive. So kind of fun. The turbidity layer is pretty thick. And so it's pitch black. If you don't have a flashlight, you're kind of SOL. You're doing a braille dive, and braille dives are no fun. I've done plenty of those. So Braille dive, we jokingly, here, I'll show you a braille dive. So braille dive basically means that you're doing this and you're trying to find stuff. So fun story for you. I was at in Idaho Falls here in the Snake River, just right downtown, just below the falls, across from the Snow Eagle, and I was doing a dive. It was a braille dive. I literally if it wasn't right here in front of me, I couldn't see it. And all of a sudden, I felt a whoosh in front of my face, and I wasn't sure what it was. And then all of a sudden, I saw the fish, and it was in front of my face, and literally 3 inches from my face. And it was like, oh, and it was a sturgeon that was right in front of my face, and I saw about 3 or 4 feet of him. So definitely interesting experience. Definitely concerning that at 60 feet that a 7-foot fish was able to get within a few inches of me before I knew what was going on. So, but cool. Are you guys interested in doing that class? If you guys are, I'll be happy to work with you on that. I think you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. I'd say, yeah, we might actually be traveling at that time, but I was just curious if, like, you had to, like, it's only offered like twice a year or something like that, or how that sort of worked.
With me, I do it on demand. So as I find, like
Okay.
I said, as I find things that you're interested in, it was very difficult. I had to really push hard when I was coming up through the process and taking classes, some of these classes to get some of them. And I had to wait and hope to get on the schedule. And there's a couple that I missed because the communication wasn't great. So I try and run my side of it a little differently, that if you want a class, let me know. And if I have to do it as a one-off, we do it as a one-off. And if I can get other people, like Josh is in that class and he's interested in doing it. So I went ahead and scheduled it to make sure he was taken care of. And then if I can get some more people in the class, fantastic. If I can't, he still gets the class. So I'm
Okay.
more about trying to figure out what you need and let's get it taken care of.
Okay. Yeah, good to know. Yeah, and thanks for
Yeah,
those dates. Well, I'll keep those in mind. So I
absolutely. And
should know here
if
short.
the August 4th date doesn't work in terms of dives, it's not a problem. There's plenty of more opportunity for dives up until, for you guys, it'll be about the mid to end of October. It depends on the year, but I've dove out there with normal students until the beginning of November, but it definitely does start getting brisk. So be aware. So there's time. I mean, we've got September, August, or August, September, October, and November. So we have 4 months so we can do dives for you guys.
Okay.
Unless all of a sudden you guys get really froggy and you say, hey, wait a minute. I heard there's this thing called a dry suit. So I love dry suit diving. I pretty much, I don't do anything other than dry suit diving. I will dive wet with you guys. But the standards say that I need to dive a similar setup to you guys. So thus I won't dive a dry suit for that. I will suffer through being wet, and I will dive a semi-dry. But other than that, I'm a dry suit all the time. And I really like it in that, I mean, I dive at summer, I dive at winter. When I come out of the water, I unzip. I'm dry, I'm warm. There's no problems at all. I get out. I've gone to Ryrie and dove in a polo and dress slacks. I put my garments on and over top of it and dive like that. So it's not a big deal. So, and I apologize. My office is a little messy today. I'm putting together the notes on my other side over here for class tomorrow, and I've got my dive. I grabbed my dive flag and put it up here so I wouldn't forget it. So, so I want to make sure I had everything. I'm a little slow to the party today. By this point I've got everything laid out and ready to throw in the truck, and I'm a little late. I don't know. I got lazy today. So
It's Friday.
It is. It happens. Well, there we go. Well, that's how we worked. For you guys, one of the next classes along that I might encourage, and I'll do a fall class for this. It's called Stress and Rescue. I really like Stress and Rescue, especially for newer students. There's 2 parts of Stress and Rescue. The first one is the actual Stress and Rescue class. What we do is we go through the process of stressing you out. I create situations that will stress you out with the idea of helping you understand what it feels like to get stressed in the water, and then give you some opportunities to learn and experience how do I get through that stress. And there's some pretty simple strategies we teach from real world experience on out, and to help you understand, okay, if I feel this, I should do that. And it's about the scenario. So I go through and help you understand and to give you a bunch of opportunities to become more comfortable. It's a quick way to get comfortable in your gear as well. The second part of stress and rescue is called React Right, and that's your first aid, O2, AED, and CPR training. And it's all pretty basic stuff. If you've done the American Heart Association stuff for like O2 or AED or CPR, you've done a much higher level, or not a much higher level, but a higher level course. So it's you'll get more out of that, and that's absolutely acceptable to get you past that portion of the requirement. But stress and rescue does require all four. So and the way we teach it is all dive related. I oddly enough have one dive master that is an EMT that I certified, and I've got one dive master I'm working on that'll be there tomorrow that is an advanced EMT. And so I'm working hard to get them both to assistant instructors so they can teach it, because I would much rather, I do a fine job teaching it. I'm very strong at it, but the difference between me teaching it and the EMT teaching it is definitely a different experience. So I generally have them actually do the work, and I stand back and take the credit for it, but they actually do the work. So they do a fine job of that. So that's kind of where I suggest after that. And then deep diving and night and limited viz. Between night and limited viz, nitrox, and deep diving, that will cover 90% of the diving you guys are going to want to do. The cool stuff, I think, is after 60 feet. And I love doing night dives as well. I absolutely love night dives, especially in the ocean. Everything that hides during the day comes out at night. So you get the octopus, you get the squids, the lobsters come out and they wander freely. So it's pretty cool. It's definitely worth it. So that's my pitch on that. Let's just jump into it. Help me understand, what is nitrox, guys?
Any air mixture of nitrogen and oxygen with oxygen above 21%.
That's exactly right. In truth, the book will tell you that it has to be over 21%, but in truth, everything we breathe is nitrox. It's a blend of nitrogen and oxygen. But it is, when we start talking about the pro term of nitrox, what we're using that to describe is a higher percentage of nitrogen, or lower percentage of nitrogen, or higher percent of oxygen overall. So what's the composition of the air we breathe?
That's the
Darren?
79 and 21.
Absolutely.
Nitrogen to oxygen.
Absolutely. So simple enough. And then I'm certifying you guys for level 1 and level 2. It would have been in your reading. I'm just curious, what's level 1 blend of nitrox?
So that's the 32.
Exactly. And level 2 is what?
40.
Perfect.
I guess
That's exactly
well, according
right.
to the book, it's 40, I guess. Yeah.
It is 40. Level 2 nitrox, and level 3 is everything over 40.
Okay.
And you can get certified to levels over 40. So I commonly, when I'm doing my decompression diving and advanced diving, I use blend. My preferred blend is 55-60%. And my second preferred when I'm doing heavy decompression diving is 100%. So it is absolutely something that people do. I do it, and it's fantastic. So, but you need to be certified for that level as well.
When you say decompression diving, that's essentially deep
It doesn't
depth.
have to be not specifically deep. It can be, but anything that goes outside of the SSI dive tables that takes you outside of the non-decompression limits. So that can be at a 100-foot dive for an hour. Absolutely, that will definitely take you into deco. So it doesn't necessarily have to be deep, but it can. And certainly adding deep to it adds other challenges to be aware of as well. Especially you start getting past that 130, 140, 150 mark. You need to go to a more exotic blend of gas to breathe, and that's called trimix. So that's absolutely a thing. And understanding the math between the 3 blends definitely gets a little more complicated. And a key of understanding. So that's what we mean by technical diving, though, is basically anything that's outside of the non-decompression limit tables that I'm teaching you guys to dive within. And we'll go through the tables here in a little bit as well. And we can kind of look at that a little bit more in depth. So, Michelle, what are a couple of advantages to nitrox?
Longer bottom time. And shorter surface interval time?
Absolutely. Those are the biggest two advantages. There is a debate out there, absolutely, that does nitrox really give you more energy after a dive? Now, I can tell you it is not a placebo effect. I've absolutely felt that, and it absolutely does. Now, there's two thought processes on why it gives you an additional lift after diving. The one of it is that there's a narcotic effect to oxygen, to higher percentage of oxygen. And there's one group that will tell you that it's because of a higher percentage of oxygen gives you that narcotic boost, right? It feels good. There's another group of that will tell you that as your body works to do something, right? And in this case, process nitrogen, process it into the tissue, process it out of the tissue, that causes your body to work. If you're doing that less, your body is working less. And so there's a thought process that because your body is not having to create as much effort, it's also not going to be as tired. You know, if I sit on the couch all day long, I shouldn't be tired at 9 o'clock, right? But if I go out and dig a ditch, I'll dig ditches all day long. I'm absolutely going to come in stinking to high heaven, one, but more importantly, at 8 o'clock, I will be passed out like a big dog, right? Sleeping on the couch. Mm-hmm. So those are the two basic thought processes on. My personal belief is it's a little of both. That you definitely have a narcotic effect from oxygen, but it's not a bad narcotic effect. And that because your body's working less, that it's going to not have as much pain and weariness at the end of the night. So that's the idea. Now, Darren, in the reading, it talked about the limitations of nitrox. What are the limitations of nitrox?
Well, the depth. You have to worry about actually the toxic effects of too much oxygen.
Exactly right.
Whereas you don't have to, which is an additional, I guess, consideration than you have with normal air.
That's exactly right. Too much of a high partial pressure of oxygen can become problematic to both the pulmonary system and the central nervous system as well. So that's perfect. Good job. So as we kind of go through this, the idea of partial pressure, we've talked about this a little bit in class overall, but the idea of partial pressure is that as we descend in the water column, the pressure around everything becomes more. So we start having to deal with Dalton's law on this. And as we go through this process, there's going to be more inside of the same space. So as we get down to 33 feet, for example, seawater, for the purpose of this class, we're going to talk all seawater, just to make sure we're all the same sheet of music. But as we go down in the water column, to 1 bar, instead of breathing, or to 2 bar, I'm sorry, at 33 feet, instead of breathing 21% oxygen, now we're breathing equivalent of 42% oxygen. Our partial pressure of nitrogen has gone up from 79% to 158%. Now, one of the benefits for nitrox, as you can see very quickly, that with 32% nitrox, I'm breathing 68% nitrogen instead of 79%. Now, that translates absolutely to the second atmosphere to 136%. So now all of a sudden, now we are 12% less nitrogen uptake, which is definitely to our advantage. We're taking less, 12% or 22%? It's 22%. I'm sorry. Math is off today. I apologize. So 22% less nitrogen that we're uptaking. So in simplest terms, what that means is we can actually dive deeper on nitrox in this case, but it'll be equal to a shallower oxygen dive. So as we start looking at the tables and we start getting the idea of decompression and non-decompression limits, we're able to go to an equivalent air depth. Remember, the dive tables are based upon an air depth. So that's kind of one of the neat things with this is as we're taking up less nitrogen in our system, we're safer. We don't have as much nitrogen to come out. But if we wanted to keep it equal, we could actually go deeper on into the water column. So I could go to 1.5 or 2.5 atmospheres, and it'd be equal to a 2 atmosphere air dive. Simple enough?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. I knew you guys would get this easily. So we'll skip into here. So as we go through this, we need to be aware that there's hyperoxic and hypoxic ideas that we need to be aware of. What we're breathing currently is about 21% oxygen, right? As we start going into the hypoxic dynamic of this, the threshold for hypoxia occurs at about 16%. Now, one of the things that happens is it definitely starts to affect the mental performance of what we're dealing with. We're starting to be able to have a fog start to kind of place over our thought process and work as well. It's one of the reasons as I dive, I make it a habit. And I've said this in class before, that diving is a very, 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 very self-aware sport. The more you can check in with yourself and be aware of what you're feeling and what you're doing and what's going on with you, the better off you're going to be. So as I go through this process, I do mental acuity checks. I do basically a DOI test on myself, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I tap my fingers to make sure I'm tapping out. And then I do basic math as I go through the process to see where I'm at in this. Now, as we continue to decrease the amount of oxygen that we're breathing, at 12% is required to remain conscious, and at 10%, the level to sustain life is ended, right? And so that's an important number to remember because it is on your test, and you should have already passed the test at this point. But I remember a number of years ago, I went through a course called NATOPS, Naval Aviation Training Operation Procedures. And one of the really fun things they did, they thought it was fun. I don't know that I was super impressed at the time, but now I realize what it was, is they put us in a hyperbaric chamber. And the idea is they put an oxygen mask around your neck, and they have a naval corpsman that's breathing, oxygen on, and then they take you up in the altitude. And the idea is you're a young Marine, and we want you to understand the feeling of what happens when you go hypoxic. Recognize the symptoms, recognize what it feels like. And when you get to that point, we want you to put the oxygen mask on. We just want you to feel the symptoms, right? And I can honestly tell you, my job in this, as I sat at this little table, was to look at the cards and say, 2 of spades, 3 of clubs, 5 of diamonds. And I look at the card, identify it, say it, and they were recording this on VHS at the time. That's how old I am. And you go through this process. And I can honestly tell you, I was going through this process. I felt lightheaded for about a second. The next thing I remember was there was a corpsman holding a mask over my face, yelling at me, Mr. Hadfield, Captain Hadfield, are you awake? Are you awake? Da, da, da. And he's yelling at me, and I'm feeling this oxygen. I'm like, I'm fine. Everything's good. And so they repressurize the chamber. I'll go back out, and we start watching the video. And my video looks something like this: is 2 of clubs, 2 of clubs, 2 of clubs, 2 of clubs. I had locked into the last action. But the funny thing is I don't remember that happening. I do remember feeling slightly impaired and lightheaded, and then nothing. It was very quick, right? So I can tell you, as you start going into that dynamic of hypoxia, it definitely is a very big concern in that it comes on very quickly. And if you're not hypersensitive to it and kind of know what it feels like, you're definitely going to have a problem. I watched a video not long ago of Jill Heinerth doing the same thing, taking somebody into a hypoxic state on a rebreather. And the subject of the test, when they saw him go glazed over, they pulled it off, and they put a regulator in his mouth, and he had a hard time just creating breathing at a normal rate. He just got down to 12%. And he said the same thing. He said, I felt it coming over, but it was like being separated from my body. So just be aware. You've got to constantly check in. You got to be almost hyper vigilant as you dive. It's definitely to your advantage. Now, if we go the other direction, we're breathing at 21%. We get up to the threshold of 1.10 is the threshold where oxygen toxicity symptoms can begin to appear. Now, the 2 numbers you guys want to memorize for all the rest of your diving days and on the face of this planet are going to be 1.4 and 1.6. And 1.4 is the oxygen or the point where partial pressure levels of oxygen present a moderate risk to divers. The recommended partial pressure limit for divers. This is recommended. Now, 1.6 is the partial pressure at which oxygen presents a more substantial risk to divers. It's the absolute partial pressure limit for recreational divers. Now, as I go through it, I do everything. I with figure out the mod for my tanks and best blends. I always base my best blends and my mods on 1.4. But I also understand that I've got a little bit of leeway when it comes to safety on that as well. Now, you guys already talked about this. I feel strongly that you have a pretty good understanding of this. Now, one of the things that it's kind of neat about nitrox is we use it to help prevent decompression sickness because we're not uptaking as much nitrogen. It's definitely a key piece here. But what are we talking about when we talk about the sacrifice of the nitrox safety margin?
Sacrifice.
That I don't know.
Good.
Well,
It's not super
yeah.
paradigm works. So there's a couple different thought processes when using nitrox. And one of the ones that Dan Orr will tell you, and he was the president of the largest insurer of first divers in the world, a company called dan.org. He'll talk about running nitrox, but using it on an air table. So what that means is that instead of taking advantage of the visual safety or the visual of nitrox, he runs it at the more conservative level. Now, here's where it gets tricky, is you have to make sure that you take into account the uptake of oxygen and the on your daily limits of that higher percentage of oxygen. And you also need to make sure you take into account the maximum operating depth of the gas that you are breathing. I've seen this before, and I'm sure I'll see it again, where a diver will say, okay, I'm going to dive nitrox on an air table, and then they forget to put the the max operating depth on their tank and take that into account. And they also neglect to take into account, okay, I'm going to be diving for this long on this partial pressure of oxygen. I need to make sure that I'm staying within the NOAA limits of that as well. And we'll get into that a little bit more deeply as well. So that's what I mean by sacrificing of the nitrox safety margin. Is certainly you can run an air table on that, but just be aware you need to make sure to add the other additional safety margins on there if you do that. Now, Michelle, my big question to you today is richer gas better?
So I remember from the video, I think it was Josh said that it depended on your dive and what you were planning to do. And so I guess I would echo that, because if you want to do a deeper dive, it wouldn't necessarily be better. Correct?
Yeah, like for most of like our
Limiting.
regular diving below 60 feet, the EA 32 would be better than like 60 or something like that. Richard's definitely not always better.
Yeah, absolutely, within moderation. Richer is better for the most part, as long as you take it to the correct amount, right? And that's the key, is making sure that we take into account that 1.4 partial pressure, and we stay within the safety margins. But as we get deeper, that becomes that partial pressure of oxygen and nitrox that we can use becomes thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. For example, if I was using a 28% blend, that'll only get me to about 115 feet. So, which means as I get a little deeper, I get to 130 feet, then I'm using a 26% blend. So I'm only 5% safety margin above and beyond. So just you need to be aware of, is richer better? Yes and no. It depends on making sure that I'm staying within the predefined safety limits. Simple enough? Now, as we go through this, there's a couple of laws that we deal with. And the first one's Dalton's law, and the second one's Henry's law. Now, you guys are more than welcome to screenshot and read this and Google it and Wikipedia this. I fall asleep about the second bullet point on this, maybe the first bullet point, because they're actually that boring. Henry's law is basically the law that will dissolve a liquid directly into a gas, and Dalton's law is the law of partial pressure. Now, in truth, what we really need to know is coming up. So Dalton's law is the basis for most nitrox calculations. Now, you can certainly memorize this formula, but let's make this a little easier for you guys. And this is one of the meat and the potato things that I really want you guys to take away from this. You're welcome to screenshot this as well. Nikki will tell you that it has been years since I've actually used a table. I do all the math by hand every single time, and because it's really not that complicated. So let's take a few safety notes into account, and then let's do some math together. So oxygen becomes toxic at 1.6, so the working load for oxygen for safety is 1.4. Key factor. Nitrogen begins to become narcotic at 2.37. So those two numbers are very, very important. 2.37 for your nitrogen, 1.4 for your oxygen. Now, nitrogen becomes unsafe to dive at 3.95, unless, of course, your name is Czech Exley, and then he still end up dying from high pressure nervous system disorder, basically, which is an offshoot of nitrogen narcosis. So he might not be the best example of this. Be aware that nitrogen will become equal to 1 martini on empty stomach for at 100 feet, and it will increase exponentially from there. So to give an idea about that, you get to 100 feet, nitrogen narcosis will feel like 1 martini on empty stomach. At 133 feet, it'll feel like 5 martinis on an empty stomach. At 166 feet, it'll feel like 12. So it keeps going up from there and there. So just be aware, nitrogen narcosis is a cumulative effect, and it grows at an exponential rate. So as we kind of go through this, a couple things to be aware of through this. So we get ready to do this math. Oxygen is 21%, nitrogen 79%. Feet seawater, 33 feet seawater is 2 atmospheres. So for example, 2 atmospheres at 21% is equal to 42% oxygen. At 3 atmospheres, it's equal to 63% oxygen. So 3 atmospheres is 66 feet, 2 atmospheres is 33 feet. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's look at the other side of that just for a moment. Remember, we talked about 2.37 is the first point where nitrogen becomes narcotic, right? So as we start looking at nitrogen at 2 atmospheres is already up to 158%. It doesn't take long for nitrogen narcosis to start creeping in on us. So my favorite part of this is math. I like math. So Dalton's law on practical application is going to be 2 parts. It's going to be a best blend, and it's going to be our max operating depth, which is basically the same algebraic equation, but very simple. Simple to do overall. So I don't want you to think this is overly complicated. And this is something you can absolutely do anywhere you're at that you have a calculator, but in your SSI app, there is also a chart for you to look at. So simple enough, if we're using the theory of 33 feet atmosphere for every 1 additional atmosphere, and we're using a 1.4 working load, how do we figure out the best mix? Now, you may or may not be aware of this. Wherever you go, you can always ask for a blend of nitrox based upon what you want to dive. Now, if you're just doing a simple recreational boat that's going, I'm going to top off at 60 feet, most likely they're going to put you into either 32 or 36%. But as you begin that process of moving up to bigger dives, you'll have that opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to be diving the Lady Luck. The Lady Luck is deck where I want to be is at 115 feet. So what's the best mix for this dive? Well, here's how we figure that out. We start with the depth, which is 115 feet. We divide that by 33 feet seawater so we can come up with an accurate account for the atmospheric pressure at that depth. In this case, it comes out to 3.48. Now, we need to make sure we always add back in the surface atmospheric pressure. Because remember, there's this, what we're breathing right now is 1 atmosphere. As we go down, we start increasing in atmospheres. So 4.48 is what we actually come out to with actual, right here is actual atmospheric pressure. So that's important to know. 115 feet to get to the atmospheres. We simplify it out. 4.4 is our Fahrenheit. We take that 1.4, that's the working load of partial pressure. When we divide it by our atmospheric depth, and we come up with 31% nitrox. That's all there is to it. It's really not complicated. We just need to figure out what the atmospheric depth is where we're diving, and then make sure to add in the surface and divide by our partial pressure of what we'd like to be. Let's check our work if you wouldn't mind, though. So we said 115 feet was our depth. We want to use best blend. We came over to the SSI chart, and 115 feet magically comes out to 31 feet. Now, if you guys would like, I'm happy to send this slide deck over to you as a PDF, and so you can pull out these formulas as well and re-review this. You're welcome to have that. Or you can screenshot. Whatever makes you happy makes me happy too. So that's how we figure out best blend. So if I want to go somewhere, and like I said, the Lady Luck is one of my favorite dives. Her deck's at 115 feet. She sits at 140 feet of sand. this is the mix that I use. I call over and I say, hey, I want a 30% blend because I would like to go just a little deeper and be able to go into the hole and stuff, a few things, and give myself a little bit more depth. But if I decide to go out and hit the sand real quick, I'll still be okay. I just won't stay there. All right. The other important thing is as you start working with nitrox, you need to know what's the deepest point I can dive with the blend that I'm diving. Now, here's how we do that. It's like I said, it's just the other side of the equation. So 1.4 is, again, our max partial pressure for a working load. So we're going to take that 1.4 divided by the partial pressure of nitrox in that cylinder minus 1, because we have to take away the surface again, and multiply it by 33. So, for example, a diver wants to know how deep he can dive with a 40% blend of nitrox. Simple enough. He's going to take that 1.4 divided by 0.4, which is the partial pressure blend of that nitrox. He ends up with 3.5. Take that 3.5 and subtract out the surface atmosphere. He gives us 2.5. 2.5 atmospheres times 33 feet of seawater gives us 82.5 feet. Let's check our work. So we come over here and we're going to find our depth. Let's see. Our partial pressure is 40 feet. I apologize. And at 1.4 partial pressure, that means the deepest we could dive on 40% is 83 feet. So they rounded up. I don't know that I'm a fan of that. I like to round down or round shallower, but a half a foot among friends is not going to hurt anything. We also have the convenience of looking at this table, and they've already got it set up for 1.6 as well. So we know that when I was talking earlier that I wanted to dive 31% nitrox on the Lady Luck right here. Let's see. The final answer was 31% nitrox to 115 feet. I can come over here and I can say, okay, on my 31% nitrox, whoops, sorry, I didn't change there it is. On my 31% blend of nitrox, there's my 116 feet is my max operating depth on 1.4, but it also gives me 137 feet of total depth if I decide to go down to 1.6 and be a little riskier. On the Lady Luck, just so you know, I typically do a 30% blend, which gives me 121 feet of bottom depth. It shortens up my bottom time a little bit, but it gives me 143 feet of depth. That's how we simply do it. Now, your guys' turn. So I'm going to pop off this slide for just a second, or I'm going to actually even easier. I'm going to put me back on. Then yes, I have my feet on the desk. And you guys got your calculator and pencil and your think caps on?
Yes.
Easy enough. So if I wanted to do a dive or I wanted to use a partial pressure, we're going to do max operating depth first. So if I wanted to do, I went to the shop and they gave me a 36% blend of nitrox. What is the deepest I can dive on 36% nitrox? At 1.4. Who's the math genius in your family? Is it you, Michelle?
I just like math. I don't know about math genius.
Does Darren always question you and you end up being right anyway?
I do.
Oh, she's literally a math major in school.
Is it 90? Would you round it? 95.33
Well, or
95 is exactly right.
to 95.
Good job. Let's try one more, just to make sure we've got it. So if I had I go to a shop and they give me a blend of 32% nitrox. What is the maximum operating depth at 1.4?
We both have 111.375.
111 is right
12,
on the money.
111.
Good job. You guys got it. I'm proud of you. All right. Let's go over. So the four of us, Nikki, you, me, and Darren, we're all going to Truck Lagoon, and we decided we're going to hit the Corso. And we've decided that it is at 120 feet. We want to dive 120 feet. What is the best blend of nitrox considering 1.4. Now remember, the formula is basically the same. It's just a reversal of it. It's all the same basic formula. 120 feet is what we're looking for. Best blend. You remember how to do it?
Yeah.
Good.
So I have
Did you find 1.459?
yeah, it's point or 30, I guess, basically.
30%
0.30.
is exactly right. Good job, guys. You did fantastic. I feel strongly that you guys have it. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. All right. So nitrogen narcosis, we've already kind of gone over what that is. Basically, nitrogen narcosis is when you get to high pressure nitrogen, it starts disrupting the neurons and their ability to fire between. We can certainly go through that process. We can talk about the iceberg or the Myers-Overton theory, which is the most common prevalent. But let's just jump into kind of the predetermining factors that cause nitrogen narcosis. Carbon dioxide buildup is the first. Now, Michelle, how do you think I might come up with carbon dioxide buildup in my system?
Holding your breath, or
That's
think
one.
breathing too rapidly.
Exactly. So it's more of a mental thing. So I need to make sure that I'm breathing normally. Rapid descent and cold are definitely two ideas as well that cause that. We're causing an exterior pressure and an exterior breakdown of what's going on. It allows nitrogen narcosis to kind of slick in there. Now, certain drugs and medications, and I couldn't honestly tell you what they are, but if you are on certain drugs and medication, any drugs and medication, please let your doctor know. And my piece on that is always make sure that you're cleared for diving by a medical professional if you are on some sort of medication. Perfect example, something that was a precursor for oxygen toxicity. I had a friend they were doing a very long cave penetration. It was 3,000 meter cave penetration with an advanced student that they were working with. And about 1,000 meters into the cave, a pretty good distance in the cave, their student showed signs and symptoms of CNS, central nervous system toxicity, and passed out. They immediately forced the regulator in his mouth and began an extradition out of the cave and got him out of the cave. They got within about 100 yards of the exit and through the final major restriction that they had to push him through, and he came to. They finally got him out of the cave, and they went to do a post-mortem on this overall dive to find out what had happened and what caused it. What they found out that he was on a strong antipsychotic medicine that gave him a much higher than normal predisposition to oxygen toxicity. So there are definitely challenges out there and things that will cause problems in your breathing, problems with diving as well. So again, get cleared by a medical professional if you are on any type of medications at all. Now, other things as well that definitely cause this, limited visibility. That's a mental thing. As you get in that limited visibility and darkness and you become scared, loss of orientation, scared, high air gas consumption, mind going crazy, inexperiences at depths below 60 feet, task loading, again, mental, lack of sleep, muscle tiredness as well as mental, exertion, physical outlook, mental, anxiety, a mental issue, time pressure, mental. As you can see, the mind plays a huge role in your potential to uptake and have nitrogen narcosis. Now, some of the things that we're looking for when nitrogen narcosis comes in is a feeling of relaxation, lightheadedness, euphoria, slowed response, a feeling of well-being. And as you can go through and read this, numbness, tingling, sleepiness, inhibition, lack of inhibition. We had an incident a number of years ago where there was a young lady at about 125 feet, and she was honestly parting the ocean and laughing hysterically. And the good news is sound travels 25 times faster underwater than it does on the surface. So everybody can hear this laughter. In fact, my wife will tell you that when I'm working with certain students and she's assisting me, and I will laugh. That invariably, some class, somebody will do something that makes me laugh, and I laugh fairly easily, honestly as well. So we're going through it, and she's doing this, and woo, woo. Obviously, we went down and grabbed her, brought her back to the boat, and said, "What were you doing? Tell us. What what were you laughing at? She says, well, I was parting the sea so I could see the mermaids sing. Definitely not. So it presents differently in different people in different ways, but be aware, again, if you're feeling brave or nervous, something out of the ordinary, definitely examine that. So does it cause any further implications? This is not in your homework. If you've experienced fatigue, appetite loss, headaches, joint pain, swelling, dizziness, pain in the chest, any of these flu-like symptoms or anything that's not normal, how you go into the water is how you should feel coming out of the water. Just maybe a little more tired, but not a lot. Seek medical help. And the way to prevent nitrocirrhosis is simply get experience diving in those depths, dive a better blend of nitrox, and the treatment for it is ascend to a shallower depth. If you're still not feeling it, then simply end the dive and don't go deeper than that as well. So if your symptoms don't resolve, go ahead and when you reach shallow water, you need to end the dive and surface as well. Easy enough? All right. Signs and symptoms of oxygen on the diver. Let's see. We're going at a pretty good little clip here. We should be done shortly. So I'm going to get into, I know you've read this, and so I'm going to get into a few things that you may not have got into. So Dr. J. Lorraine Smith first described the toxic effect of oxygen back in 1899. And I think that's just absolutely amazing. Overall, let's see. Turn that decline at Clint today. So it's pretty interesting as he went through this. And he noticed the severity of the effect increased with the increasing partial pressure at a very largely reversible. I'm having a hard time talking. I'm sorry. So the toxic effects of oxygen at partial pressure between 0.45 and 1.6 are primarily pulmonary. They happen in the lungs. Whereas a toxic effect of partial pressure over that 1.6 are primary central nervous system or the brain. So let's look at that just for a moment. So oxygen toxicity signs and symptoms, and this is pulmonary, lungs, a mild irritation in the trachea, cough, followed by a severe or deeper cough or harder inspiration or tougher to breathe. If the exposure consists for a long period of time, tightness in the chest, difficulty breathing, shortness of breath. If it exposes long enough, that person could die because they're not able to actually uptake oxygen. Now, where it gets interesting, just be aware of this. Pulmonary. That's a key portion of this. Pulmonary effects. The time onset in pulmonary is 12 to 16 hours at 1.0, 8 to 14 hours at 1.5, and 3 to 6 hours at 2.0 before symptoms begin to show themselves. That, in my mind, makes me feel a little bit better that as I go through this process, pulmonary oxygen toxicity takes a long time to present. Now, central nervous system toxicity, that's a different story. Now, overall, as we start looking at the signs and symptoms of CNS or central nervous system toxicity, we start looking at CONVENTED is our acronym of the day. Convulsions, vision, ears, nausea, twitching, irritability, and dizziness. Now, again, as you go through this process, be very self-aware. So, Michelle, as we look at this, let's see, click on the right screen here. Which of these signs do you think you'd notice in Darren?
The convulsions and
absolutely.
the twitching.
Possibly.
And maybe the irritability.
And that's the nice thing with diving with your buddy. You'll notice things about your dive buddy that you may not notice in somebody else. I can always tell when, I should say 89% of the time, I can tell when Nikki's annoyed with me. There's 11% of the time that I wonder. I just figure it's just she's always irritated with me, so it makes my life easier. I just always assume that I've done something wrong. But we're on the dive boat, she's in her happy place. And so if she gets irritable or snippy on the dive boat, then there's definitely something going wrong. And that certainly happened. Absolutely. So not only should we be self-aware of what's going on with ourselves, but certainly be aware of what's going on with our buddy, especially when we're married to that buddy. We've got a deeper relationship and kind of know them intricately. You know, we've driven that car enough that we know where the bumps are, right? So overall, Darren, as we look at this, what do you think you might notice in yourself first?
Let's see. Probably vision, ears, nausea, dizziness, or twitching. I would start noticing any of those probably.
Absolutely. I might argue that dizziness, nausea, and vision, nausea, and dizziness would probably be your first three. I know for me, when I get really stressed or I'm extremely angry, it's my vision. I notice that my vision is the first thing to start to go. It narrows quite a bit, and so I can tell in a situation where I'm becoming stressed or upset. When I start losing all my peripheral vision, I know that that's the time I need to step back and take a breath. For me. So I'm trying to be very self-aware through this process. And again, as you feel going into the water is how you should feel coming out of the water. So quiz time. As you dive deeper, the narcotic effect of nitrogen gets
Greater.
Greater. Yep.
greater is exactly right. Good job. So which of the following is not a sign and symptom of DCS or decompression sickness?
Cyanosis. Yep. See.
Cyanosis is exactly right. Just out of curiosity, what could cyanosis be? It's going to be one of three things.
Something pulmonary. No circulation.
Hypoxic, maybe.
Hypoxic is absolutely one of them. Hypothermia.
Hypothermia. Yeah.
Now, interesting enough, you guys are out on a dive boat. It's 95 degrees out. The water is 80 degrees. Can you get hypothermia on that boat?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I've
Depends on,
seen
like,
that. When I was in Saudi, I saw somebody get a hypothermia in Saudi. Came out of the 130 degrees into the air conditioning and ended up presenting with hypothermia. It's a cooler than normal body core temperature. So, and you also get DCS, decompression sickness, at altitude as well. So it doesn't have to be in the water. So, guys, even if a diver suffers a decompression sickness in a remote location, which should you never do?
Yeah, recompress them.
Absolutely. All you're doing is introducing other problems. Now, I'd like to be really clear on this one. This is at the point where they're presenting decompression symptoms. When they get to the point they're symptomatic, this doesn't mean that because I had this happen. I was diving the river. This is about a month and a half, 2 months ago. And I'd gone into decompression. I had about 17 or 18 minutes of decompression obligation, which meant I couldn't come to the surface because I had to stay underwater and allow the nitrogen slowly to come out of my system. I got to about the 25-foot mark. My ceiling point, my decompression stop was at 20 feet. And all of a sudden, as I came up the wall with no visibility, I hit an errant and out of control current that ended up grabbing my feet and fins and forcing them above me and forcing me to the 17-foot mark and tried to force me to the surface. I grabbed onto a rock and there was only a small indention to grab onto. There wasn't anything else. So I could only had one hand on it. And I held onto that rock for, as you might guess, for dear life for about 4 or 5 minutes. Finally, my grip was lost and I still had 10 to 12 minutes of decompression at that point left to do. I popped to the surface, realized that I was at the surface and I still had 12 minutes of decompression. So at that minute, before anything could happen, before I had a problem, I was still within a minute of breaking my decompression stop. I descended immediately back down to 20 feet and I did out away from where that current was. And I continued my entire decompression stop, came over to the rock to a nice solid place where I could hold on. And I went ahead and did my safety stop as well. I wasn't symptomatic. I wasn't presenting anything. And I had only missed my decompression stop by a minute. So I was able to swim back down. This is talking about if you pop up too quickly, you don't do a safety stop, and you are on the boat for 15 minutes and you're starting to nausea, joint pain, sickness. This is what we're talking about here.
You basically prevented it from happening by going back down. And
Absolutely. But I was within a minute and I was not symptomatic. What you'll find is most ECS starts to present about 14 to 17 minutes after the dive, after you pop the surface. That's when it becomes the worst. All right. Next question for you. Hypoxic hypoxia. And I say this every time, but it's fun to say. I'll say it again for this video too. It's far more common form of hypoxia. This condition happens when?
so, A.
A is exactly right. You guys are crushing this, by the way. All right, fine. One more question after this. When oxygen pressure in the blood drops below a partial pressure of 0.17, mild symptoms of hypoxia will occur. Blackout and death may occur if the partial pressure drops below.
Yep.
D.
D is exactly right. Good job, guys. And finally, a possible source of contaminated air in scuba cylinders is when
A.
All of them. Yep.
all of them. Absolutely. Some compressors are run by diesel. So let's see. I believe you probably got a pretty good understanding of this. I know that I covered safety stops, but I would like to cover them one more time for you guys as well. So overall, the key point is to remember, always do a safety stop. And this is a sign and symptom. And I'm going to teach you a little, I'm going to go over this one more time to give you a little different idea of a safety stop. The idea, though, of this is that there's no clear line between the hard M value and silent bubbles becoming symptomatic bubbles. They start out as bubble seeds and they become silent bubbles and then all the way up to symptomatic bubbles. So, but what it does show in this is that there's a safety margin between those. And if you do less deco, less safety stop, you increase your risk dramatically of becoming and moving into the symptomatic point. But the key to remember this is very simple. Dive tables and safety stops are how divers manage the size of the bubbles in their bloodstream. Safety stops will assist in the reduction of the size of those bubbles. Importantly, there is no clear line between good and bad when it comes to this for M value. The challenge is, Michelle and Darren, is how I uptake nitrogen and process and diffuse nitrogen out of my system is very different than how you guys do it and how you do from each other as well. I can tell you one easy difference you guys will notice immediately in diving is, Darren, I hate to say it, but Michelle is going to whip your butt when it comes to sac rate. You will pop up at 500 PSI. She'll pop up at 1,000 to 1,500 PSI. It just is what it is.
That happened on Sunday.
Happened on Sunday? Well, good. You're already seeing it. Just be aware, she'll always have more gas. Michelle, you have to be careful. Just because you have half a tank means he's almost out. So make sure you guys are checking in with each other on a regular basis. I was diving pretty heavily before Nikki and I met. And then when we met, I was still diving very heavily and working through to become a pro. So for many years, I beat Nikki on sac rate. And sometime last year, it magically happened that we started evening out. And about 50% of the time, she came up with more, and 50% I came up with more. I can honestly tell you that that ratio has moved to, she comes up 3 out of 4 times with more gas, and I come up 1 out of 4 times with more gas. The nice thing is as you guys get to know each other, you'll know where that gas consumption is. But as we go through this, and I'm going to change the colors on this because I don't like the colors, it's important to note that a diver diving, these was divers diving to 120 feet for 25 minutes. And when they did direct ascent with no safety stop at all, they were at about 119,000 bubbles per cubic liter, very high, right? And you can see where that high point hit is right about that 15-minute mark, just like we were talking earlier. Now, the divers that did a safety stop of 2 minutes at 10 feet reduced, you can see the massive reduction in bubbles in their system at that 15-minute mark, but they still have bubbles all the way out to that 120-minute mark at 2 hours. Now, another group of divers, they did a safety stop for 1 minute at 20 feet, 4 minutes at 10 feet. Which diver would you guys like to be? Divers A, B, or C?
See.
Absolutely. I would want to be C. Absolutely. That's what I try and do. That's one of the reasons I do safety stops the way I do them. So overall, the key points of this: safety stops reduce bubbles. Longer safety stops reduce more bubbles than shorter ones. And a 5-minute safety stop during repetitive dives increases your safety margins considerably. My thought process on this is there is nothing you will do that will be more fun than you blowing bubbles in the water. There is no portion of your job, Darren, that is more fun than you being in the water with your wife and having fun and seeing fish. Is that a fair statement?
Well, yeah, I think like even just floating stationary at a safety stop is fun to me. I mean, you're still going to see things, most
Absolutely.
likely. Yeah. And 5 minutes goes by fast.
It does. So overall, we've been through this, and I feel strongly that you have a pretty good understanding of this. Just be aware, as we start looking at this, and we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, the equivalent air depth in feet. So as we start going through this process, we notice, let's just pick 60 feet. It's a nice, easy number. So as we look at 60 feet on 22% is equal to a 61-foot dive. So we continue out the process. We're absorbing the same amount of nitrogen on a 38% blend at 86 feet as we would on 21% at 60 feet. So it means we can dive deeper and have the same nitrogen uptake. Or we can stay at the same depth and we can stay there longer overall. That's all we're trying to say with this. Now, let's see, click on this. Now, there is something called the CNS clock. This is the exposure timetable based upon NOAA overall. And what it basically says is as I go down, I'm going to start taking on a clock for how long I'm going to be down. So, for example, if I take you guys out and we decide we're going to dive the Lady Luck together, which is a pretty aggressive dive, right? At 120 feet. We're diving at a 1.4 partial pressure the entire dive. It tells me the maximum dive limit I have is 150 minutes. My daily limit is 180 minutes. So how I figure this out, if we decide to go down and we're diving the Lady Luck at 120 feet at a 1.4 partial pressure, we decide to dive her for 30 minutes. That tells me I'm taking up for 30 minutes 20% of my single dive limit and 17% of my daily 24-hour limit. It tells me I can do that dive 4 times because the maximum amount you want to ever achieve on any of these tables is 80%. We, like anything else, we want to make sure we're not pushing our limit to the 100% limit. So we try and keep our maximum limit for single dive and daily limit below 80%. Does that make sense, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty easy stuff. All righty. Flying after diving. What is the Dan recommendation, guys?
24 hours.
24 hours is exactly right. Now, Darren, you and I, we decided to hang out and we left the girls at home and we're out at Truck Lagoon doing some big dives. And we're doing 3 a day. Maximum, we're K divers at the end of every single dive because we're being manly men and doing big dives for hours on end. And we do that for 5 straight days. Do you think that limit is the same? Is it still 24 hours?
The 24-hour. If you've managed I'm thinking it would be if you managed your daily that daily amount of 180 minutes doesn't change, I don't think.
It
So
doesn't.
I'm thinking yeah, it doesn't change. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it does change.
So here's the suggestion from Dan. If you're going out and doing big dives and lots of dives, then it is encouraged to do a minimum 24 hours, but it's suggested that maybe expanding that out to 36 hours. Where this really comes into important is when Nikki and I go somewhere and we do technical diving. For example, we did a lot of tech dives in Hawaii month before last, where we're going out and spending lots of bottom time, big big decos, doing 3-hour dives kind of deal. We absolutely took and we gave it 36 hours to make sure that we were off gassing all the nitrogen that we needed. At the 36-hour mark, you pretty much are covered. But that's the key to it, is take it into account of what you've been doing. If you're doing all easy recreational dives, 2-a-day recreational 60-foot dives, or diving nitrox, and taking in all the other considerations, 24 hours is fine. But in the case where I was talking, Nick, Darren and I, we go out to truck and we're doing 3 days, and we're coming up as K group divers after every single dive because we're only staying out for 10 minutes and we're doing maximum dives. It would be to our advantage to consider giving ourselves just a little extra time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I can tell you, Nikki and I have pushed that limit. We've been just at the 24-hour limit on diving, and there's been no problems. But just be aware that that's something that you want to consider. Now, analyzing nitrox is a pretty straightforward process. If you give me 1 second. I'm going to grab a tank and a nitrox analyzer. I meant to bring it up and I just forgot. So give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Like the tables.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Sorry about that. This is a nitrox
okay.
analyzer. So simple enough. I'm going to make you guys do this on Sunday as well. So I'll bring out my nitrox analyzer. So they all work about the same. This is pretty basic stuff. Simple enough. One side turns it on. The first thing we want to do is you want to calibrate it out. There we're trying to get it. So there we go. And as you can see, it's at 14.5. We'll keep turning this end dial. This is interesting doing it in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal is to get it to 20.9 or 21. Oh, there we go, 20.9. So now we have it pretty much calibrated out. And what we can do is we can certainly put it on a known gas, and that's an easy way to do it as well. Or we can trust that it's reading the atmospheric pressure of what we're doing. It hasn't been used in at least 24 hours. So I'm confident that 20.9 is going to be good to go. Now, the biggest pain in the butt with steel tanks is as you fill them, they get hot. And when you put something rubber over top of a hot tank, it melts it around the stem. So that's why it's hard to get off. So what I'm going to do is I've got this calibrated. I'm going to put this right over the end. Can you guys see that?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure. So you're going to put it over the end, and we're going to gently turn the gas on. And that's the key, is gently turn the gas on. And we're going to let it run until the numbers pretty much stop moving. So there's a little bit of nitrox in this tank, but not a ton. It came out at 21.2. Your guys' tank should come up substantially higher than that. But that's all there is to it. Now, once I've got that information, there's a couple of key pieces that I need to do. The first one is write that down. Put this in like that. Try and be good about putting my analyzer away.
And do you in practice use that then, kind of like what the reading said, is like any time that you get your custom mix or best mix from a dive shop or whatever, you test it yourself?
I do. I do not dive a gas that I do not know. I will not dive a gas I do not know. And a funny story for that, we were in Florida in November of last year, And we got blown out by a hurricane, and we finally we drove an hour south. It was the only boat we could find that we could get on. It was just a recreational boat. They were doing a 65-foot dive on the reef. We got there, and we'd ordered up nitrox, of course, and steel tanks, and they put our tanks on the boat, and I said, I need to analyze that. And he said, oh, I analyzed it. And I says, well, that is wonderful, but I need to analyze it. He says, well, I'm a retired firefighter. I says, thank you for your service. I need to analyze my tank. He says, but don't you trust me? I says, not for nothing. I'm a retired Marine. I thank you for your service, and I'm glad that you served like that. But no, I met you a minute and a half ago, so no, I do not trust you. I don't trust Nikki to analyze my tanks, and she doesn't trust me to analyze hers. We trust. She knows the password to everything, and she's on the will and title for everything. I trust her with my money and everything else, but not with my nitrox blend. I want to see that myself. So every single time I analyze it myself, he was very adamant that I wasn't going to analyze, and I was very adamant that I wasn't getting on the damn boat unless I did. So he finally broke down and found an analyzer, and we analyzed our tanks and wrote them down. So I analyze every single time.
Was it accurate?
Yeah, he was right on. And it's really not a matter of whether he was accurate or not. It was a matter of I'm not willing to play Russian roulette with somebody else's dynamic.
Yeah.
I feel strongly that it's my job to understand what's in my tank that I'm breathing. I take my life very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So
it seems like so that's like a standard practice to measure it yourself, and
it should be.
Him arguing with you over that sort of shows you his I don't know, lack of discipline, I guess, or
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm just pretty annoying about that I'm going to a bug flew into my cup. Dang it. So I'm just not willing to take the chance that he wasn't drunk last night and had a fight with his ex-wife and didn't see me as a potential opportunity to go to prison or get money from the insurance. So, a million things, million stories in the big city, right? So, I can see that being more typical on just a basic recreational boat. I just fervently disagree with it, and it's not just because I'm a high level instructor, but that is the standard practice, and that comes not down from me, but that comes from the RSTC, which is the World Scuba Diving Council, that sets the standards worldwide for diving. So that's where that comes from. It doesn't come from me. I just think it's a great practice, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. It just I refuse to shortchange the standard and shortchange the dynamic. So now you guys have done great. The last piece of this is once we get our reading, we need to do a few things. Now, I can tell you for me, I do this a little bit more aggressively than most. I don't use a hanging tag. You want to use a piece of tape and put it on the neck. And the first thing you want to do is what the partial pressure of the what's in there, the mod in feet or meters, but make sure if you do meters, put an M after it. If you do feet, put an FT after it. You will be diving internationally and I believe firmly that the
Thank you. Cut out, Ben.
Yeah, Ben, we can't hear you anymore. Actually, it says that he's on mute, though, doesn't go into. It looks like, oh no, we're still there. You put it in the chat.
Oh.
Must have had an issue.
Yeah. I don't know. He can just get right back in.
Mhm.
The way that guy put up a fight about him wanting to measure it made me wonder if he was being suspicious.
Yeah, because it is standard operating procedure. Why would you?
Why would you care?
Right.
Someone wants to check it.
It should be routine. Why would a fire investigator have smoke alarms? Smoke detectors. Don't even go back in with me.
Sure.
There we go. Sorry about that. We had a internet outage for a moment, and I deeply apologize for that.
Ah,
So
that's okay.
let me go back to
No
share.
problem.
And give me more share present. That's the only downside with doing these classes like this, is every once in a while that happens. All right, there we go.
Yeah.
So there's a few things that we always want to make sure that we put on our and we do not put it on a tag like they've shown here. I 1,000,000,000% disagree with this. I use a piece of duct tape at the neck of the tape. I also do a few other things, but we'll go through that in just a moment. So the first thing we want to put on there is what's the percentage of nitrox that we have in the tank. Once we understand what the percentage of nitrox in the tank is, we do our math and we put what our mod is at 1.4. Now, one of the key things to remember is we want to make sure we put it in feet or meters. This is a key thing because we will be diving internationally. And that is an absolute error and problem that can occur. And we want to make sure we can avoid simple errors if we at all can, because it makes our life a lot just that much better to avoid simple, dumb errors. And believe it or not, that has happened and it has caused deaths. So make sure that you're putting in there what the blend is and what the system that you're using is as well. The next thing you do, when did you do it? And then sign it. This is your tank. If your signature is not on your tank, you do not breathe it. It is personalized and is yours. Your tank should be marked with a nice nitrox tag as well. Here's where I differ. And this absolutely comes because I dive technical as well. And it becomes a lot more concerning when you dive technical. So I also take and put a tag, and I use a large tag. I use I keep my duct tape handy, and I use a full big piece of duct tape, and I put my mod on the bottom of the tank, and I'll show you exactly where. I put just above the boot on both sides in big letters, mod 128 feet. And I put it on both sides. Now I do one extra thing in technical diving that you don't have to do, but I also put it on the very bottom of the tank as well. And I put it on the other side of the neck. So I mark my tank in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate places. For you guys, I would encourage the neck, the backside, and then the bottom, front, and back with the mod. It's just a nice safety habit to be in the habit of, and it will definitely help you out as you go through as well. So always mark your tank, always sign your tank, and always put the mod in the dynamic of what you're supposed to put it in. Now, the other thing to be aware of is all tanks should be marked with something like nitrox or geyser gas. Or voodoo gas is another one. You will see these tanks. I've voodoo gas. See images. You will absolutely see images like this. Voodoo gas, another popular one. That was not pulling up nitrox. There we go. I have seen this one as well, geyser gas. But if it's yellow and green, This is not your gas. Do not breathe it. Here's a few other stickers that people think they're being funny with. This is not your tank. Voodoo gas, unless you're prepared to meet the dark mistress, or what is it? Trying to see what it actually says. My microphone's in the way. But they get fairly humorous. Divers are definitely have a sense of humor all their own. But you'll see this. I've definitely seen it. A green and yellow label like this tells you that it's nitrox. The other thing you're looking for is on the side of the tank. You're looking to make sure that it's been O2 cleaned and that it's within visual inspection range as well. How long is the visual inspection range? At what intervals do we do those, Darren?
I'm gonna say that was yearly still.
It was what? I'm sorry.
Annual or yearly?
Yeah, no,
Was it-
annually is exactly right. So make sure that those are done. That pretty much ends the overall class. The biggest things to understand is the simple math. You guys crushed the math, absolutely, to figure out mod and best blend. Good news is in your My SSI app, there is a table for you. So if you're not in the desire to do the math like I do every single time, it's just easier. I can usually do the math before they can find the table, their handy dandy table. It's simple math. It's not rocket science. And make sure you always measure your own tank, and make sure you always mark your tank and sign it. It is your tank. So those are the biggest things. What questions do you guys have?
What I guess we never talked about what do you find of interest or questions?
I don't really have any.
When you go out and let's say call in, generally speaking, does it take a dive shop long to put together a
Not
mix for
terribly.
you that you
I
request?
usually give them a because it's not like I'm going to suddenly wake up this morning and go diving this afternoon with a custom blend. I usually give them a couple days. So when I what was it? Last April when Nikki and I, or was it April? Somewhere March or April, we went to Florida for 10 days. When we went there, we knew exactly what dives we were going to do. I'd already planned them out a few weeks ahead of time. So I called over the dive shop and said, okay, this day I'm diving this and I need this blend of gas. On this day, I need this. So I went ahead and called over and ordered everything about a week in advance. But typically at the dive shop in Stewart that I use the most, Nikki and I dive Stewart Scuba probably more than any other dive shop. My daughter doesn't live far from there, and they're a flagship ITI store, so I really like diving with them. I could typically call in a day in advance, 2 days in advance, and get my blend. And then I've taken tanks in after a dive for the next day and said, hey, can I pick this up in the morning or later this afternoon? This is the blend I want. And they'll say, okay, and they'll make it happen. Where it gets more difficult is when we start getting into trimix. They generally like a little more lead time on trimix because it's a more complicated blend.
When you're so like the example you gave where you're planning out your dives ahead of time, like do you know, are you able to do that because you're kind of researching exactly what like you want to see on the dive and at what depth and stuff it is? Like how do you know what you intend to
Most
look
dives are
at? So
pretty
like
standard. It's if you're doing an advanced boat, they'll tell you that the range on this depth where we're going is going to be between this and that. So they'll tell you max depth on this dive is probably going to be 120 feet. And so I'll
okay.
order based upon 120 feet. But a lot of times I know the dive that I'm going to do as well. For example, Fort Lauderdale, when we go down, I can guarantee that we'll at least do 2 to 4 dives on the Lady Luck. I know the deck on that is 120 feet by basic research. It's Google. We'll
Okay.
do 2 to 4 dives on the HMS, which is the same thing, 120 feet. And then we'll do 2 to 4 dives on the Zoo, which is 105 feet. So we know which dives we're going to do, and we tend to be a little more specific. When you start getting into more recreational boats, you'll find that you're more at the whim and the pleasure of the boat, and they'll have 7 to 15 different sites that they may go to, but within that boat, they'll know the depth. Okay, today's boat is going to be a 50-foot to 60-foot dive. You may see 70 feet, but pretty much you're going to be at 60 feet. That's the aim for all the sites we're going to go to. Or today's an advanced boat. We know we're not going to dive one. We're probably going to be 120, 110 feet on this. And dive two, we'll do a shallower dive to 80 or 90 feet. Typically, they won't reverse profile. It's extremely rare to see a boat reverse profile. And typically, they'll always do one big dive and one smaller dive, or they'll do 2 equal dives.
Okay.
Lady luck. Sometimes you'll get you'll luck out and you'll find an advanced boat that's doing a double dip, which is wonderful. That's what I prefer to go out and do. If they're going to do a double dip, it makes it easy for me because I can take 2 tanks and a deco, and they'll drop me in. I'll stay for the entire duration of 2 tanks and a deco, and then I'll come back up. And by the time when I'm popping back up, the divers are going in for their second dip. So I did 1 dive at the time for my dive time and their entire surface interval. And that gives me about an hour on the boat to just relax and chill. So, but you can do the double dip too. Most people do the double dip. They'll dive, come back, hang out in the boat, have some crackers, have some cookies, and chill for a while, get some water, relax. And then they'll gear back up and then jump back in and do another hour dive and then come back up. If I have my choice, I'd rather just stay down for the entire time and burn through 2 tanks and a deco. So that's my preference. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the nice thing is a lot of the dives that you guys are now qualified to do, you'll be surprised. Some of the short dives, like if you guys go to Hawaii, if you ever go to Kona, I've got a whole bunch of great dive sites I can send you off to that you can spend a ton of time in. You will suck through all an hour and a half of air, and you won't hit deco. There's an amazing dive in Jupiter, Florida called Blue Heron Bridge. Deepest it gets is 30 feet if you're lucky. And it's easy to take an 80 cubic foot tank out there and blow through an hour and a half to 2 hours and see a ton of stuff. You'll see coral, you'll see crabs. I saw the biggest starfish he had to have been 28, 30 inches. And he was a fast little bugger. He was like, it was pretty cool. Biggest starfish I'd ever seen in my life. It was giant. I've seen garden eels there. I've seen spotted eels. I've seen morays. I've seen tons of skate rays. There are all kinds of parrotfish to dolphin fish. I saw a thing on the other day that somebody saw a sailfish come through there. So there's some places like that you can go and you can just spend all the time you want. So easy enough. What other questions you guys have? Happy to answer them.
I'm just trying to think. Just trying to think. As far as this stuff goes, I guess the only thing I can think of. So like low oxygen. Would you, other than like if your air were out, like it's always really a matter of overexposure diving wise, right? Like would you ever have, because you couldn't really be or is it maybe like diving at altitude or something? Like when would you have to ever worry about too low of oxygen, like getting to
a hypoxic
0.12 or 0.14? Yeah.
No, not really. To be honest, you're going to have to go to some pretty substantial altitude to get to where you get to a hypoxic level. Really, where that starts coming into play is when you start getting into exotic gases, and you're purposely running a low partial pressure or hypoxic blend in an exotic gas because you're trying to eliminate the nitrogen and reduce the concern of oxygen. So there's some things in this course that I look at like that one. That's a great question. And I can certainly see why that raises a red flag. But overall, when you start talking about CNS, it's going to take quite a bit for you guys to get anywhere close to CNS toxicity, a substantial amount. You just don't have the amount of breathing gas and time to get there. That's the safety margin. And so there's a few things in here. And that's why I added in the idea of really where pulmonary oxygen toxicity happens is you're going to have to be breathing 200% oxygen for 4 hours for it to become an issue. On CNS, it's a different story. It's certainly, you're more prone to CNS toxicity, but again, with the level of dives that you guys are going to be doing, it's not something that I'm concerned about in the least.
Mhm.
For the dives that I do, absolutely. For my hardcore technical dives, where I'm doing a 3-hour dive, I absolutely need to do that. And one thing just to be aware of, and this is kind of one of your reasons to get a diving computer, is your diving computer is designed to, I'm going to share my screen again, to monitor all this for you. And that's what diving computers are great at. This one happens to be the EAN Core. I bought one of these for my wife a few years ago. It was great. I could see the numbers from a distance, and you can see how bright and clear it was. But what it did is it monitors the depth, the dive time, the non-decompression limit, the ascent time, and how much gas I have in my tank. I think a dive computer is, after your own BC, is one of the most important purchases you will get. It'll also monitor, when you program in the nitrox blend that you're diving, it'll monitor your oxygen toxicity limit as well, and keep you safe with that. And it'll give you warnings before that ever becomes an issue. So having a good dive computer is definitely a key piece of kit that I definitely encourage. My suggestion on dive computers, this is just from personal experience, is buy the nicest dive computer that you could possibly afford plus 10%. Yeah, with kind of with my budget, with your budget, I'm sure I run out of dive computer options before I run out of budget, because I have no problem buying the nicest and best. But it's, we start getting that level. The Sunto EAN Core is a great computer. The EAN Steel, another fantastic computer. The Apex DSX, fantastic computer. Nikki and I also both have Garmin's. I have a Garmin Mark II Descent, which is a fantastic wrist mounted computer. You guys probably, it's my black watch that I wear. I'm wearing my running watch today. Yesterday was my dive watch. And then Nikki has the Descent G1 and does a great job as well. It's a daily computer, or daily watch as well. It tracks steps, and I get my texts through it and all kinds of other stupid stuff like that. And hers has got a stupid long life. I want to say it's like 21 days or something before she charges it. It's G1 Solar. It wasn't terribly expensive. I want to say $600, something like that. Now hers is not air integrated. She cannot put a pod on her computer, on her tank. Mine is air integrated, where I can put a pod on my tank and it'll monitor my gas as well. But so it's things to think about. My suggestion is, for your primary computer, get one that is air integrated, that you can add a pod to your first stage, and it'll monitor your gas as well. And it give you really neat stuff at the end of it. It'll give you gas consumption times, gas consumption rates as well. And it'll show you where you're consuming more gas, where you're consuming less gas. It does a really neat job of providing a tremendous amount of metric for you.
And it tells you, like, your like I saw on the screen print there, your safety stop recommendation.
Absolutely.
Stuff like that.
It'll not only give you your safety stop, but it'll give you your ascent rate. If you're in the green, you're good. If you get yellow, it wants you to slow down. If you're in the red, you're going way too daggum fast. It's pretty slick that way. And a lot of them will give you alarms. My DSX vibrates if I'm going too fast. So does my Garmin. They vibrate if I'm going too fast as an alarm. When I get within 5 minutes of deco, they both give me a vibration alert to let me know something's going on. I see the kitty. And then, so they'll definitely help keep you safe, and it makes it nice to have it on your wrist as well, that you can just constantly monitor. So I strongly encourage a nice dive computer. I have done inline computers. I'm just not a fan of them. It's just one more hose coming off the back. I like an air integrated with, that has a remote pod. I think they do a much better job, and it's just less for me to be in my way and get tangled on stuff. So
what is a remote pod, or what does that look like then?
I've got one right here. So you get this is just a remote pod that you plug into your first stage. It just screws into a high pressure port, and then it transmits the information to your wrist computer.
I see. Okay.
And so it's definitely nice. I've got it for most of my stuff. There's a few of my setups that I don't have a pod on. My teaching rig, I don't use one on it. And then some of my complex rigs for my full face mask, for example. Well, no, I take that back. My full face mask does have a pod on it, but I have a manual SPG as well because I didn't have a pod for a long time. My twin sets, I have a manual SPG. Everything else has a pod. So, especially for my side mount where I'm managing 2 tanks at the same time, I have a pod on each one of them, and it puts the gas on both tanks on my computer as well. So one of the slick things that you can do with this is kind of a neat thing. I'll put this up. With this computer, you can put 5 or 6 pods on it. I'm trying to remember. But what you can do is you can program each other's pods into your computers as well as your own pod. As long as you know which one's your pod, you're good to go. But you can actually monitor your partner's gas from about 30 feet away.
That's pretty cool.
That is amazing.
So and it's funny. I've gave other people my rigs before that had a pod on it and an SPG, and sent them off and dove behind them, and I was able to keep track of where they were at in gas. I did that one time at Belmont Hot Springs. I sent somebody off. They wanted to try diving my rig, and I was like, okay, sure, yeah. And so I dove behind them just to kind of keep track because I knew I wasn't bingo gas, but I think I gave them about 1,200 pounds, 1,500 pounds of gas. So I was like, okay, I'll just dive behind them. And when they get close, if they're not paying attention, I'll just tap them. And sure enough, about 700 PSI, I just came up behind and tapped them and says, okay, it's time to go up. And they're like, okay. So we went up. But they're like, how did you know? How did you know? And I'm like, I've got your gas on my computer. I can see it, And they were like, oh, okay. So
that's funny.
So definitely a cool way to go. I only thing I'm concerned about putting my wife's or you guys putting each other's pods as well on your computer is making sure you're monitoring the correct gas. I'm a big believer in the KISS method. So all diving for me is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. I'm not smart. I wasn't smart enough to get in the CIA, so I had to join the Marine Corps instead. So I realized my capacity on complex things is limited. So I try and keep it as simple and stupid as I possibly can, and less complex makes my life easier. So
I like that.
So that'd be my suggestion. You can do it. I know people who do it, but it's just something I'd like to at least raise the flag and say, hey, this is what I could see as the downfall and the concern.
Mm-hmm.
So, any other questions?
All right. I think I'm out of questions. How about you?
I'm good.
And you guys have
Thank you for all of that.
Always feel free to text, email, call, whatever makes you show up at the door. My address is probably on things as well. Come bang on the door. If I don't want to answer, I got the Ring doorbell, so I'll just won't answer. I'll hide. No, I'm just kidding. I will not hide. We'll absolutely let you in. All you want about whatever you want. So.
Thank you.
All right.
And just to give you an idea of the books in my background, the binders, that's about 10% of my instructor manuals that I have studied and passed tests on for your guys' stuff. That's about 10% of it. So the rest is sales books, and then the lower shelf is all dive books. And then this shelf up here is all diving books. So that's what we do in our spare time is I read about diving. So just fun stuff. In case you're wondering where are all the books? So,
yeah.
Any other questions for me?
I think we're good.
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome.
Thank you for taking the time.
Oh yeah, we covered a lot. If you have more questions, here's a promise that I make to every student. You are welcome to audit any class that you've already taken with me. So if you want to come back to another open water class and I've got room, please come back. You're welcome to join any other open water class anytime. If I'm having another nitrox class, just let me know you'd like to attend. You're welcome to attend any class that you've already taken with me. You're welcome to audit the class as well. And if I'm going out diving and you hear that I'm going out on a dive and you would like to do it, call me up and we'd love to have you come. If you can't get enough dive gear from Ashley, let me know. I probably have it. The only thing I can't cover you guys is in wetsuits and fins. I've got really big feet, and so my fins probably won't fit. Maybe Nikki might be able to cover you, but I can definitely probably cover you with a BC, reg, and tanks, but I can't cover you with wetsuits. I probably can cover you with masks, but you already have that stuff. So just let me know. You're welcome to come at any dive I do and audit any class that you've already taken with me.
Do you put that stuff like dives on your site here? The Teach Me
I
Dives.
don't do as many
Yeah.
as I would like. I would like to. I've got the last 3 weekends at Yellowstone and the previous 2 weekends to that at Bear Lake in the can, ready to edit. And I just haven't had time to edit them. I run out of time, but I've got 5 weeks of diving videos that I need to put together and do something with. So I just haven't had time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really good about putting these classes up. Your guys' open water classes were kind of being weird. I was uploading them from my phone, and for some reason they just wouldn't go. And so last night's class just finished uploading, and Tuesday's class is at 54%. I had to restart it. So, but they'll be up here shortly. And then this class will be easy. I can have this up. I'll have this up by Monday. Easy.
Okay.
So I try and be really good about that kind of stuff.
All right.
Awesome.
Yeah, I guess we're good. And
We'll see you in the morning.
yeah, if we think of anything, we'll see you tomorrow.
Absolutely. If you need anything, just text me. I'll be there at 8. I'm going to go. I've got a little bit more gear to set up than you guys because I'm doing a class after your guys' as well. But there should be a lot of divers. I'm guessing there's going to be about 30 of our divers there tomorrow. And then there's another dive shop coming out, and they'll be diving as well. So there should be a fair amount of divers out there. I'm a big fan of the more the merrier. So
Is that the spot we're going to? Is it just a popular place for divers, or?
it's the private docks at Ryrie, and I just realized that I hadn't sent everybody out the location, the map. So I'm going to try and do that right now. I just got to find you guys in my text here, and I've got a little map. Have you been to the private docks at Ryrie?
I don't think so, actually.
On the far side?
Yeah, I don't think we have. I think we've just been on the boat ramp side.
Gotcha. I think this is you guys. I'm going to dig in and find that I've got a little map in here, and I will. It's been a while since I've sent it out, but I'm going to send that right now and get you guys taken care of. But I've got a little hand map in here somewhere, so you should get a little 2 pictures from me tonight. What you're looking for is Juniper Campgrounds if you're using your GPS.
Okay.
And then I've got a little map, and I just have to figure out what the heck I did with it. I know it's here in one of my 10,000 photos. I take way too many photos. I'll be the first to admit that. But thank you for reminding me. I've been meaning to send that out, and I've gotten a little forgetful, and it's just been a little busy. So I apologize.
No, it's okay.
We'll get you taken care of. Perfect.
Okay.
Well, if I can do anything else, guys, what? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was we bring our standard tanks tomorrow, and then nitrox on Sunday.
Correct.
Okay. Just,
Exactamundo. And then Sunday morning we will analyze those tanks together, just to make sure. And I'll bring some duct tape and a marker so you can mark them as well.
Okay.
All right.
Because we always want to mark them, even if we're just going to throw them on and use them right then and there. We're always going to mark them.
Okay. Sounds good.
Easy peasy. Cool. All right. Well, I will see you guys bright and early, bushy-tailed and bright-eyed, ready to go.
Sounds good.
All right.
Awesome.
We'll see you then.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good night,
You
Ben.
too.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Take care.
Bye.